Thank you, CPN, for having us here today. And for you all, it's great to be here. My name is Caitlin McNamara, and I am a child life specialist. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But really, I just want to say, I hope after today or after tonight, really our goal at ChildCore and my goal as a child life specialist and working with children and teens and their families is really that you walk away today feeling a little bit more confident and a little bit more comfortable in the tools or the resources that you have to be able to support, and I say child, but really I mean child, school age, teen, young adult, a sibling, a peer, a classmate, just to help support them a little bit more along their journey, along their medical journey. So that's my hope for you today. I'll go ahead and we'll start the presentation. And again, if you have questions, because I absolutely acknowledge every child and family and experience is unique and different and deserves a unique and different approach and experience. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the general recipe for supporting someone with understanding a new diagnosis or a chronic diagnosis. And that, but again, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'll leave some time at the end for some further discussion. Go ahead. All right. Everyone see that okay?
Looks good.
All right. All right. So first of all, so again, my name is Caitlin. I am co-founder with my partner, Adrian, who is also a child life specialist. And we predominantly worked in medical settings and in nonprofits throughout Chicago, Arizona, and the Bay Area. And what we really found was this gap there are a lot of psychosocial supports within institutions. So whether that is schools, early intervention, hospitals, clinics, but really when it came down to it, they work and function in pillars. And so often it is the child and the family that are those connecting bridges. And yet they have the role of being a parent, being a child, being someone that, has a diagnosis, is going through a medical experience. And there's already so many expectations that then are put on families: advocate, therapist, educator, case manager, that really thinking through how we could meet the need of families by providing psychosocial child life culture of practice, across institutions. So really we created ChildCore as a resource for families that are undergoing medical experiences and need support or want support or are seeking support in how they help support their child across multiple institutions, across multiple domains. And when we say child, we also are thinking about the sibling or other, close loved ones, friends, family members, children. And really, our goal is to help build the capacity of caregivers and family members, but also providers that serve these children and families, to again, kind of focus on some of the psychosocial supports, but recognizing that what that entails, their development, their coping, that those are skills that transcend across domains, that you don't just see those isolated in a medical setting, in a hospital setting, or when they're 3, or only when they're 17 and in school. We really look at child life. The fundamental values are looking at a child and family's systems and development, and how can we help provide buffers and kind of protective factors against things such as medical experiences. So a little bit more just about going into child life. People may not be familiar with child life. A lot of times, child life specialists are predominantly in larger pediatric hospitals, clinic settings. But really, again, we focus on the development and those fundamental building blocks of development and supporting kids and families to continue to have those opportunities to grow and develop and cope and thrive, all while going through a medical experience. And again, that could be a congenital diagnosis. It could be an acute onset diagnosis, or it could even just be an experience in an emergency room, because somebody needs their appendix out, or they need to have surgery because they broke their arm, or they have a loved one, maybe an adult loved one, that is going through their own medical journey. And here it is, this kid, this child, this teen that is also being impacted by that experience. And so Childlife kind of spans, we provide a lot of procedural support, a lot of preparation, but really looking at kind of a longitudinal view. And that very much is what ChildCore is not only focusing on the acute need, again, brand new diagnosis. There's a lot that goes into it, just from the medical side, but also from the psychosocial side and the support. But then looking at how we're setting kids up down the line. Is this somebody that, they will have this with them? Is this somebody that has to integrate medications into their daily lives? Is this something that has someone that has, now different abilities, or has to, take a step back from school, or so however they're kind of impacted by this medical experience. Our goal is to really help create care plans and supports for the child. And then again, caregivers are the most important people, even to teens, even if they don't want to admit it. But they're also the most important people. And they're kind of, again, that conduit between all the different institutions that provide care for a child. So that's a little bit about ChildCore and Childlife and kind of my background. I've done some work, again, in San Francisco in our intensive care unit. I've done some work in Chicago at the Chicago Children's Hospital, Comer, and most currently, I'm working in our hematology oncology department in Oakland. And so today, even though there's a much larger topic, and there are a lot of different needs and supports of people that are going through medical journeys, today we're going to focus on how is it that we support children and families in understanding a diagnosis. And so again, just reflecting back to how I mentioned every child and family and diagnosis and experience is different. And this could be, the 3-year-old that has a new oncology diagnosis that is for the first time kind of learning about what happens when your body is sick, all the way up until a young adult or a teen who, say, has a congenital chronic diagnosis of sickle cell, but is now just really starting to learn more about the diagnosis because they're going to be transitioning and taking on more of a role in their care. And so really kind of there are different touch points throughout different people's journey. But today what we're going to kind of look at is no matter where they are in their journey, there are things that we can do and constantly be doing to help them not only understand the words or a definition, but to really understand what it means to have that diagnosis happen to them and happen to their body, and what that entails, and how do we help them integrate that diagnosis and that treatment into who they are as a person. So first, again, this for a child that has a diagnosis, siblings are so important and can play such a huge, important role. Peers, classmates, schools are such, schools and friends and activities play such a big role in kids' lives and in their development. That they are really an instrumental support for them, for kids, and especially teenagers and young adults. And so being able to empower kids or families or even providers to be able to provide that level of support to classmates, can again really lend itself to that support to that child and that family. And we'll get into a little bit more about the whys. So what is it? What is it important for children to know? You know, we really talk about in Childlife and when we're supporting families in using medical terms, even though they're complex and complicated, but that it really can help normalize these terms. It can help make them feel less scary. And also, kids are very smart and very, a lot of times attentive to things that are going on or can read. And so when they are seeing things, especially this day and age where people really have access to information at their fingertips with the internet, there's a lot out there. And so if kids aren't sure of things, or they're, they hear this big word and it sounds really scary and complex, but really, it just means a type of medicine, or, it's a vitamin that they've taken their whole life. So really kind of using the terms just to help them really kind of recognize, again, even if they're young, developmentally not able to really understand like the definition, but just to be able to hear that and recognize that becomes familiar, and familiarity is comfort. And so this next one is kind of one of my top favorites. Let me just move. Okay, there we go. Understanding the different body parts and their jobs to make the body work. And I can't stress this piece enough, in that even as adults, even as I've worked in medical settings for the last 2 decades, and obviously I am not a trained physician, but there are a lot of things that you're just like, wait, what? What is this? What is this foreign language? What is this that I'm navigating? And when it's broken down concretely in different ways that the body works, it's much more digestible. Especially because, diagnoses and things that are happening inside the body are so abstract. And children of all ages, and this is the same for teens and young adults and even adults, is that when you're learning new concepts, having concrete analogies, using concrete narratives that you already have, language, all of that helps make things, again, more digestible and easier to understand. And so whether it's just the 3-year-old that is learning that their body is sick, and when they have a tube in their arm, they get medicine and that helps their body feel better. Or when they get sick, their body may feel tired and they can't do all the things that they like to do. They're learning about how their body works. Something is inside their body, or the cells inside their body, or when they drink their milk or eat their food or have their vitamins and they have strength, their body is able to do things, such as things that they like to do. Or again, back to that teenager that potentially has just kind of lived in this norm of having a chronic diagnosis, and they know they go to the doctor, they get infusions. When they have pain, they go in, they get help, and they've just never really had to kind of really understand it, because they just knew that when they were feeling pain, they went in, they were able to get helped, they knew the name of their medications. But now they're really starting to need to know, why things are so important for their body, or what can actually happen if they aren't compliant with their medication or their appointments, if they're starting to take on more of an independent role. And so learning about, again, back to the basics of understanding the different body parts and how the different body parts work and work together. And then most importantly, how they're being impacted by whatever is going on, and then how and what the treatment can do to support that. Next, understanding what, medical equipment is for. So, even if they start learning about their different body parts and how things are working, but understanding, even though, not everybody with an oncology diagnosis has a central line, but everybody with an oncology diagnosis will either have to go to the doctor or have to receive medicine. And so talking about, what it is they're IV tubing or their central line, understanding why these things are important. And then again, back to if they're learning about their body part and about how the medicine goes into the vein and how that gets to the rest of the body, they may not understand, all the nuances of blood and what happens, but it also opens the door to help with misconceptions. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Understanding the daily life impacts. So again, maybe, developmentally, somebody is unable to really understand what their diagnosis definition is or what that really means for their body, but they can understand that they need to take medicine in the morning and at nighttime, or they need to, help understand why they can't go to school for the next couple weeks, or why they have to keep going into the doctor's office when their friends don't. So again, understanding different parts of the body, understanding medical equipment needs, understanding how it impacts their daily life. This helps with the whole picture and helping a child or a teen really encompass what a diagnosis means and what it means for them. Because again, it can mean very different things. You can have, one child with one experience, or they have an aunt or an uncle who had something and they had an experience. But again, we really want to tailor it to what does it mean for this child and this family. And then this kind of goes along with the daily impacts, but just kind of understanding changes. So, whether, from previous experiences or maybe what's shifting when they go into the hospital versus leaving the hospital, or going into an appointment, leaving the appointment, starting a school or switching schools, kind of anything that where there is like shift and changes that are related to the medical experience, and helping them kind of understand the why behind that. Again, it may not be because you have an oncology diagnosis, you have cancer, so you have to do this, but it's more because remember how your body works to protect you from germs. And right now your body can't protect yourself from germs. And so that's why we have to do X, Y, and Z. We have to stay home from school. So again, it still helps encompass what their understanding is. So where? This can happen anywhere and everywhere. We actually encourage, not just to have, quote unquote, a conversation or a discussion with your child or teen in a medical setting or in a very formal sit down setting, but more so integrate it into what is already happening. Are you having a movie night and you have a conversation? Are you driving in a car or watching a movie and you want to bring it to their attention? We do, and this is obviously sharing an experience with whether it's your child or a sibling or a peer, is really hard. And we all want to naturally, do what's best. And so today, again, I just want to kind of emphasize that there is no one right conversation. There is no one right specific language. There is no one right thing that you can do. The best thing that you can do is to just be open to helping with support. And again, is that helping them understand how they're being impacted? Is that understanding maybe why they can't do something? Is that maybe using the words that they hear so they recognize them? But also, we recognize that there are some kids that really want to know a lot of information and want to have that sit down conversation and asks all their questions. And that's okay too. And so what we always kind of just focus on is, again, it may not be just the caregiver. And again, this can be really just, these can be really hard, tough interactions. And so, but we do always encourage a trusted support person to be present or engaged. And the reason why we say that as well is that, spoiler alert, kids and teens want to protect their caregivers just as much as caregivers want to protect them. And so often they may not want to bring up a conversation or a question or something they're wondering about, or something they noticed about a classmate, or about themselves, or something changing in their body. Not because they don't have a trusted relationship, but because maybe they don't want to worry a caregiver or upset them, or they, if they don't want to stress them out. And so we always say, like, if there is a coach, a teacher, another loved one, that we also kind of open the door for kids to also be able to feel comfortable and supported in maybe talking through some of their worries or playing through some of their concerns or some of their questions. So again, is this, in the hospital? Is this within the home, school setting, driving in the car? Oftentimes, having more of that kind of organic approach can actually just help all parties included feel comfortable. And again, oftentimes we're really looking at not just having a conversation, but even with older kids and young adults, what other tools and concrete things can we be using? So are those pictures, are those iPad apps? I have a couple of resources that are great, that are interactive, really help break things down for all different ages. But again, kids are learning it through interactions. They're learning through play. They're learning through, being able to kind of have concrete things that they can feel and touch and manipulate. And so again, that's not always just having a conversation, but can be multiple modalities and kind of a multiple prong approach. So we're always getting the question asking is kind of, when is the best timing? And we always like to encourage kind of as soon as possible that a child and a family is in a comfortable place. There are times where there are more acute events that happen that bring someone into the hospital or a new diagnosis information. And then it doesn't have to be, that day, that minute, and if they don't know right then, or that conversation isn't had, that it's going to somehow impact them for the rest of their lives. That is not the case. But we do say that, again, kids are very smart and they pick up on things. And again, when it's happening to them and to their bodies, and they're noticing differences, or they're picking up on a change in routine that they have. Maybe a routine is really important, and now all of a sudden it changes. And so, what is it? What's going on? Different, all of a sudden grandparents and a lot of family is coming around, or, mom or dad aren't there as much, and they're not around as much, so they're picking up on whatever's happening to their body, but also changes in their routine and affects things that are happening around them. And so the more you can have those interactions and helping them understand things as soon as possible can, again, kind of decrease some of those fears and worries, and just acknowledging kind of that something is happening. And I always like to reassure people that it's okay to say that you don't know the answer to something, or if you're worried that they're going to start having an increase in behaviors, or they're going to ask some really tough questions. Again, it's okay to kind of say, like, we don't know the answer to that, but here's what's how we're going to find it out. The doctors are doing some more tests, or as soon as I find out, I'll make sure that as well. Or if addressing what you do know. So we don't know what is making your body sick right now, but we do know that medicine is helping you, and that right now you're in the hospital and you're safe. So again, I think alleviating some fears of the caregivers that's supporting these kids in across their journey, of that, again, it's okay not to know the answer to something, and it's okay to say that and acknowledge that. And the best thing is to really just reassure that you're going to also provide them information when you have that information. And here is kind of the important, the big why, and why we really encourage families to help their children understand, diagnoses and what's going on, but so much more than just the definition. It can minimize the fears and anxieties. It depends on where a child is in their development, but their misconceptions can be sometimes a lot scarier. Their imagination, they, preschool, school age, young school age kids, they are very egocentric. And so they feel very much that things are caused by everything that they do. And so they can't tell you how many times kids say, my brother or sister has seizures because I kicked him in the shin the other day, or I yelled at my mom and dad, and so now I'm in the hospital. So thinking about even just helping them understand from a developmental point of view as to, why these things are happening, and that, it's not their fault and that nobody caused this to happen. Another one is just even school age kids. They a lot of times they think that if they get a lab draw or they have an IV and they take it out, that their blood is just going to come out of their body and they're going to lose all their blood. And so again, you're opening up the door, whether it's through a book, whether it's through a play session, whether it's through a conversation, but you're opening up the door to identify these misconceptions, and then support them in a developmentally appropriate way. Again, reducing those feelings of guilt so that it's, that it's not their fault that they're there in the hospital, or that they have a diagnosis, or that they did nothing wrong when they were 2 that caused this. It helps build identity around their experience. And in a time, school age and, teens and young adults, when they are just starting to really build their own self-identity and figure out and, who they are and who they want to be and what their beliefs and medical journeys and experiences and diagnoses, really can play a large part in that identity. And how do they integrate this experience into their overall identity? Building, foster feelings of trust. Again, along medical journeys, there are always opportunities for caregiver and provider and child dynamics. And so, we always are striving to foster those feelings of trust, both with caregivers and with providers. And it's just another reason why we always encourage, in terms of timing, where as soon as you know information, even if it's not a new diagnosis, but you're, gathering information to talk about, or to help explain, or to help them understand through play, what is actually going on. So they feel that sense of trust that if and when things are happening, that you and providers are going to be open and honest with them. It also aids in compliance and cooperation. So, thinking about why this is happening, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to, be medically compliant and take medicine and, go to these appointments and get these pokes. And so, and understanding, in a developmentally appropriate way, how this is supporting them, how this is helping them, and providing a sense of control, which can lead to positive coping. And again, we always, from day one, want to try to set children and families up for success. So whether that's being 2 days old, or whether that is being 17 and having a new diagnosis, any sort of medical experiences, we want to be trying to decrease negative impacts of trauma from the very start. Because even though that 2-day-old that is getting poked all the time in the neonatal unit is one day, going to be a 9-month-old and a toddler, and they're going to carry those experiences, whether it's, that young may not be cognitively, but physiologically, what are they going through? That is then going to impact their development of coping skills during those times, those milestones and those building blocks when they are toddlers and preschool age and school age and teens. And so getting started, again, this conversation, I say conversation, I mean interaction. So again, it could be through books, it could be through play, it could be through interactive apps, and it could be a conversation, but helping them understand the job of the body part, and whether that again is a young 4 or 5-year-old or an older child that has had a chronic diagnosis. But again, just this kind of really relearning what is it about their body that's going on. What is happening to cause that body part to have trouble doing its job? Relating it to the child, the teen, and what they may be experiencing. And so again, we're always, talking about like, how are you feeling? What brought you in? What did you notice? Were you tired? Did you fall? Do you have, were you feeling dizzy? Just again, to relate it back to them, because kids are so concrete that even if you say, if you have a stomach ache and you came in, we can help you feel better. That's one thing. But if you say like, remember when your stomach was hurting and, your mom or dad tried to give you, some medicine, and then you came into the hospital and then you got some medicine to help with that, that's going to be so much more meaningful for them, because they have a narrative like, oh, not just when your stomach hurts, but oh yeah, when my stomach hurt, I remember that feeling. And so really just relating things back to experiences. And again, if you're talking with peers, or siblings of, what is it that you noticed? Or here's, what you noticed. And again, back to that, when you're talking about like the basic parts of the, the body and what they do, that can still be very abstract because it's happening inside. We can't see our heart beating. But again, we can use a tool such as borrowing a stethoscope, and they can hear their heart beating, right? That's an auditory stimulation. So that makes it a little bit more concrete. Or maybe even it's just Googling kind of the sounds. But again, it just gives more of a narrative for them than just kind of using the words like, oh, this is what our heartbeat sounds like. So again, thinking about the opportunities of really kind of accompanying things with visuals, with play, with things that you can manipulate. So ongoing support. So again, these are just like development, helping a child or a sibling or a peer understand about a diagnosis is built upon. And so, providing more in-depth information. So as they maybe developmentally mature, this may be appropriate, or as they become more familiar with say, for example, they have a new medical device like a G-tube. And so, providing more in-depth information as to, what the G-tube does, or maybe encouraging them to help with different aspects of flushing or doing feeds, or, giving them some choices and control when it comes to cleaning or getting a G-tube changed out. So that's kind of more of the in-depth information, kind of bringing them into the process. And then again, kind of, really focusing on the diagnosis or the treatment, and back to, how it's impacting, when we say schools and peer settings, but just kind of as kids just chronologically get older, they may have different experiences in terms of activities or settings or schools. And so how does that basically impact maybe just their daily routine, even if it's homeschooling and they may not have the energy to keep up with their schoolwork, talking about that, helping them understand maybe why they won't have that energy, during that time, say why they're getting medicine. And then again, building upon that. So then again, as kind of developmentally, looking at, as you know, again, when we're looking at the longitudinal view and we are helping somebody that is developmentally younger understand about a diagnosis, as they are, understanding more, can we provide more details that we build upon? Can we provide more scaffolding so that way, we're giving them more control, we're giving them more choices, and that can look very differently for different children. But even just how can we support their self-advocacy skills? What is helpful for them? Helping them feel empowered to either talk to the providers or create an all about me form that they bring with them, that maybe they can, show the providers, what helps them when they have to have procedures that are related to their medical diagnosis. How do they like to have information shared? Things that may be overwhelming for them, or overstimulating for them, where then they won't be able to take in information or won't be able to utilize coping skills. How do we help, again, build that environment throughout their medical journey that is going to help set them up for success in their positive coping? So again, it's all kind of back to building on and structuring, so that way, just like any new concept, any new skill that you do with children and teens of all ages, understanding a medical journey, a diagnosis, takes time and takes different resources and different tools, and different language, right? Like, as maybe developmentally they start to understand a little bit more, or they start maybe wondering different things, then, the language can also shift. But again, we're always thinking, a misconception is a lot of times, providers won't necessarily consult Childlife for teens or young adults. And then, we come to find out they really don't know about why they're in the hospital, but they didn't necessarily want to ask because they thought maybe they were supposed to know, or they didn't know why they had to be, in the hospital for longer. And so they were starting to get, more upset because they weren't understanding the importance of it. So again, we're always, and again, back to, for the most part, if you're talking with someone about a new diagnosis, it's probably the first time they're ever being talked to or supported or shown different things around a new diagnosis that impacts them. And so they may have had previous experience reading a book, looking at the internet, having a peer or a loved one, but this is a new concept for them that they then need to integrate into who they are, and what that means in that moment, the next day, and however long, or for the rest of their life. And so thinking about how, we're respecting and honoring that right to have all the tools and resources and information to understand what's happening to them and to their body in a way that supports their learning. And just some last minute kind of general tips. Bringing up the diagnosis often, again, helping just really integrate that information into their daily life. All ages benefit. I also, all the time when I'm doing like diagnosis education activities and like science experiments, how many times the caregiver in the room is like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Or, oh, like, that's a great way to describe it, right? We can all learn from new concepts and new skills, especially stuff that's so complex, such as the medical world, for having visual cues and having, very concrete things that you can touch and you can see, and that can be more relatable. Being honest, again, it's okay if you don't have the answers. It's okay to say you don't have the answers. draw on your child. They already have developed these narratives sometimes. And so, thinking about, have they watched a show or read a book or had a pet that, again, was sick or had to take medicine or had to go to the doctor or had to have a checkup or had to stay home from school, or something that you can kind of build upon. Again, to them, then it's much more personal and much more concrete, rather than sometimes just kind of going over in the general sense. So we're always asking kids, like, what do they know? What do they hear? What does that mean to them? Kind of before we're even talking about it. Because a lot of times they may say, well, yeah, like, I know that, I have to come into the doctor and I have to get shots a lot. And I also know that my classmate has to get shots and she has to do it with like the nurse in there. And you're like, oh, okay. And how does that go for them? Or how does that go for you? And you really just get more of an insight into being able to follow their lead and using language that they are already familiar with. And then that goes into kind of the repetition and consistency. There are many different ways to explain things. And so again, there's not necessarily one right way to explain a diagnosis. But what is helpful is if you're using certain language, or the providers are using certain language, to try and help everyone, all providers or caregivers that are working with that child, to use some of the same language. So, if someone is using cancer and cancer cells, and then someone else starts talking about their leukemia cells or blast cells, and then kids are unclear, is that different? Is that scarier? What is that? So just even thinking about, we're always, especially when kids are doing like a school reentry, or we're supporting a family in creating language or a presentation to share with their classmates or siblings, classmates, or maybe just even the teachers. But we're always like, what is the consistent language? Like, what is the comfortable language that you all use and you all use at home? Because that's what the child's going to feel comfortable with. And that's what they're going to feel comfortable with talking, or even just communicating, or, if people in their bubble are using those words, it feels more comfortable. And following their lead, that back to the age old saying is just kind of like, a child asks a question, and my suggestion and encouragement is always like, well, ask them back a question, like, why do you think that? Or like, what made you ask that? Or why are you thinking, did you hear that somewhere? Because, they really can, we as adults and adult learners have very different concepts than kids. And so, children will pleasantly surprise you a lot of times. And whether that's them verbalizing it to you, or whether it's them demonstrating to you through play, or through like medical play, trying to figure out why they're asking something. And then being able to answer that question. If they're not wondering about, 2 weeks from now and what's going to happen, why they have to come back to the doctor, maybe you don't have to talk about that yet. Following their lead and answering kind of what they're concerned about in the moment, because also, again, especially younger children, that concept of time is not there. And so really focusing on the concrete, what can they see? What can they hear? What can they feel right now? And that wraps it up. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you. I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions, but Caitlin, I have a couple of questions that that I thought I would jump in with, and just sort of, I'm thinking mostly too, I want to think, in my own experience, it was explaining to the siblings or the classmates what was happening, because my son with the condition developmentally could not really understand what was happening to himself. And so I love that suggestion that you gave at the end about helping a family sort of figure out what's their common language that they're going to speak. And so, in my son's case, it was a storage disorder in his brain. So we came up with this language about, he lacked a garbage truck to sort of clean out the garbage that was building up in his brain. And it was a way over time my older son could start to explain to his classmates. But how do you encourage families to come up with that kind of language? Like, or do you have exercises that you do in order to do that?
Yeah. So oftentimes, it is providing some reassurance that, it doesn't have to happen in this moment. I think with medical experiences, there's a lot that is unknown and out of your control. And so as a caregiver, we really want to, seek those answers, have that control, have that plan a lot of times. And so oftentimes we will provide like a notebook and a pen just for questions that may come up, things that they're thinking about that, they haven't been able to think about in the moment. But then also we're always saying, but also jot down, like if there's things that you're wondering about in terms of, with language or with school, what feels comfortable for you. And oftentimes just reassuring that sometimes what feels comfortable today may not feel comfortable down the line, or vice versa. You may, again, kind of in this moment, feel like you want to keep things closer, and then kind of you find yourself opening it up to others, schools, classmates, things like that, and that's okay too. So we always just try to reassure that, in this moment, there are thoughts and feelings, and we can help support that. And just know that things may change, and what your comfort levels are or language that you want to use may change down the line. So what you decide on today, or what you think works for you and your family today, it's okay. Like that's not set in stone, and that's not the end all be all. And I think that sometimes relieves some of the pressure to be like, okay, well, right now we're going to use this and we can figure the rest out down the line, but then still gives something to, tangible that they feel comfortable having at that moment.
Great. Feel free to raise your hand or just jump in if you have a question and you're willing to ask it. Encourage you, if you're going to ask a question, to turn on the camera, or you can put it in the chat. I'll go back in a minute and look through the chat to see what I can pull out.
Caitlin, I was thinking about your comment about peers and friends. My daughter was diagnosed with cancer at 7 years old in second grade, and it was right at the beginning of the school year. So we took the approach to go and speak with her classmates. She happens to be a twin, and we brought her twin with. Our ill daughter stayed home. We brought her twin sister, as a subject matter expert, so that she could kind of answer questions for her classmates, and just try to do it in an age appropriate way. It helped our family kind of take control of the messaging. So rather than have kids and other families wonder what was going on with our daughter, we established that on the first day of school with the agreement and permission of the school. But we started off just talking to our daughter's classmates and our twin daughter's classmates. And then it was so successful that we talked to each second grade classroom, just so that they knew. But it was very empowering to use age appropriate language, to tell the truth, to get ahead of the diagnosis. It felt very freeing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Caitlin, what kind of play activities do you do with kids when you're sensing that they're worried, but they're not saying what they're worried? They're not admitting to those worries. Like, how do you know when a kid is worried? And what clues can you sort of give parents, or maybe strategies for sort of pulling those out?
Yeah. One of the downfalls of, with child life in medical settings is we don't necessarily currently get to see families and a child in their, home setting, in their home, right? So you're in a medical setting, or you're in a hospital setting, or even a school setting, and it's just, it's not your home. And so there can be other factors, or people maybe feel more shy, or maybe more withdrawn. And so it really is, partnering with parents and caregivers and people that know that child best to talk about, or try and identify, are there any differences that you see? Oftentimes kids will show their worries through behaviors. There's a reason behind every behavior. And so it's not just common, it's expected when there's new diagnoses for some behaviors to shift or change. And it may be short-lived, it may be, just a little bit out of characteristic. But so we're always partnering with, talking with families about thinking about once they're back in kind of their home setting, are they noticing some differences? And then, opening the door for those worries or those needs to come out, usually through play, unless maybe it's an older school age or a teen. And then it's maybe, here's a stress ball, because no matter the age, everybody should have a stress ball and also have it in your hands. Kids and people always, even if they're not normally a fidgeter, just having something in your hand can feel really comforting. And so like, hey, let's, talk about it. Is there anything you're wondering? Or if you're wondering about something and, is there somebody else that you can ask? Again, if they're worried about worrying you. But for some younger kids, imaginary play with, medical play. So maybe if they try and reenacting a similar experience, whether it's just going to the doctor or maybe having to get an IV or a scan, and talking through the stuffed animal, the doll, the action figure, how are you feeling today? Seeing what they're saying. Oftentimes children, they may not be able to articulate like, wow, I'm feeling really anxious and worried about like what's happening with my body, but they'll be like, oh, Spider-Man is really scared. And then you're like, what's Spider-Man scared about? And it's distant. So it feels a little bit safer to be able to talk through that way. So definitely kind of some imaginary play. For a little bit older school age, there's a great activity where, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the pediatric pain scale. And so it's these faces of like happy to mad and, trying to figure it out. Again, it can be very abstract for kids. And so a very simple activity a lot of times we'll do is we just have a piece of paper with 5 or 6 circles on it. And we do an art activity where they think of a time that they're super happy and super excited or super proud. And they pick a color and they draw maybe a face. It may be a shape. And they are articulating, they're actually portraying, this is what represents to me feeling really excited. And so you kind of go through until you get, really sad or maybe in pain or really worried. So what was the time you were really worried? A, it may come out there, or B, they may have another time they create, again, a face or a shape or just color it in, whatever. But then that serves as a tool. So like, maybe later that day down the line, you're like, how are you feeling right now? Again, they may not be able to articulate what exactly it is, but they have a better attachment to, they may be able to identify like, I feel this, like may not be, worry, or I'm not sure, but I feel this. And then again, that may open the door to kind of talk about a little bit more. I'm wondering what that might be, and maybe even offering a couple suggestions, because again, they may not be able to articulate. And then also validating that it's okay to worry, and that you as a parent, have worries, and that, actually kids their age have worries, right? It kind of, again, distances a little bit and is a little bit safer for them to come forth with that.
Thanks.
I know, I just want to be mindful of everybody's time, but I also realize I don't think it will probably come out in the follow-up email, but I just wanted to also put my email in the chat. That again, with ChildCore, we're always creating resources, again, to help serve caregivers as just have information, feel empowered, but also maybe ideas or tools to actually just kind of open the door for these interactions of understanding diagnoses. But we're always happy to, just chat via email a little bit or jump on a phone call if you just have like more of a specific question, this is happening or I'm noticing this. We're also I'm not sure if I mentioned at the beginning, but Child Core is kind of an extra layer of support. So we really want to supplement and complement the providers and the resources and the institutions that are already in place supporting children and families. So we don't take the place of anything, but we are just kind of an extra layer of psychosocial support to kind of complement all the other services that children and families are engaged in.